As a writer and a storyteller, I know what it means to build a story. But sometimes I wonder if I actually understand all the building blocks. So I'm going to start an entire month talking about the pacing of stories. And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is a general discussion of pacing. Now, most people, when they talk about pacing, are talking about how fast or how quickly the story unfolds in front of you. But there's a lot more to unpack. So I'm going to do 4 episodes on this. We're going to start here, we're going to go into scene and sequel, we're going to go into acts and setups, and then we're going to put it all together at the end. But for right now, I just want to talk about the fact that storytelling is very complex, and that there's a lot of things that go into it. People say anyone can write a story. I hear it all the time when I describe myself as a hopeful author. The truth of the matter is, though, that one of the first things that are important isn't writing the story. Anyone can write it down. The trick is going back and editing and being able to make it interesting and being able to catch the interest. And part of that is pacing. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button, though, because not only do we deal with theories like this on how to tell stories and why we tell stories, but we also spend a lot of time looking at individual stories, including reviews of TV shows, movies, books, you name it. So, okay, let's start with what pace means when someone says it in regards to a story. Well, it depends. In a novel, in a movie, in a poem, in a song, they're all slightly different. But it's basically the rhythm and flow. Back last year when I did my Halloween set of videos, I said that horror movies were like a roller coaster. They felt safe, but they also felt dangerous at the same time. And part of that is the pacing. You ratchet up, you go for a quick, dangerous, whoa, and then you slow down again. A roller coaster that's all just downhill doesn't work. Mostly because when would you ever be able to get up high enough to just go down? But it's that ebb and flow, the up and down, that matters most. It's the pacing. Now, anyone that's ever read a really bad story knows that there's some out there that just, feel like they never get started, or ones that feel like they never end. Now, when we get into scene and sequel, we're going to be talking about how we use them to create pacing, how we divide them into acts and sequences and all sorts of bits. Now, once we get into the acts part and the setup, we're going to talk about the different ways we structure stories once we have the basics down. There's all sorts of ones that we could go over. And all of that is coming down to beats as well. But first, before we can put it all together, we have to unpack some ideas of what we're talking about pacing. The most recent season of Game of Thrones and the anime and movie DeathNote are both ones I've received some criticism for my reviews of, because I like both the most recent season of Game of Thrones and the DeathNote movie that Netflix just made. But at the same time, I understand that people have problems with the pacing, and I'm not going to even pretend that there aren't problems with it. So in general, we're going to keep going back and forth between DeathNote and Game of Thrones, and a couple of other series that I like a little better than both of them. And we're going to take a look at how those stories are paced, but we're also going to intermix a few other little things just to surprise you along the way. Let's start with DeathNote. DeathNote is the story of Light Turner, who finds the magical Death Note that you can write a name in and kill a person. Done. Easy enough. The anime, I gave an Electrum to. The movie, I gave a gold to. And when I reviewed the actual movie itself, I even said the pacing was better. Although, ironically, the pacing was too fast in the movie, where I thought it was way too slow in the anime. Now, turning a 30 to 40 episode season into a hour and a half movie, unless you're a magician, obviously you have to cut things down. But I want to take a look at exactly how they pace out their story. And the trick is that in the anime, they spend a lot of time inside Light's head. We spend very little of it in Light's head in the movie. Why? Well, simplest reason of all. We didn't have the time to do it. We didn't have time for the game between Light and L, which is really the main thrust of it here. Like a giant chess game the two of them are playing. In the anime, whenever these two characters interact at all, everything slows down because everything is methodical, thought out, perfectly timed. My problem with this was that several times I felt like Light did so much to cover for himself that it was almost impossible for L to figure things out, and L still made these Sherlock Holmesian leaps of logic. But at the same time, Light just was too perfect at covering himself up that it almost felt like supernaturally good for L to do it. In the movie, on the other hand, Light does make mistakes, and L's leaps of logic are a little more concise, but every time you see them doing stuff like this, it's not slow, methodical, thought-out chess moves. It's speed chess. It's bang, move, counter move, react, act. And as that happens, you sit there and you say, okay, maybe one was too fast-paced, while the other one was too slow-paced. I think that a much better medium ground would have been maybe 7 45-minute episodes of the live-action movie as opposed to an hour-and-a-half movie. Still get a little more time to develop, because remember, the speed is directly proportional to how long it takes to tell the story. Now, there's also a manga, which I have not read, not even going to pretend to have, but I've been told that it has even more time to develop these two characters. And I'm sure the pacing on that is completely different. And part of that's also the medium. A visual medium, even when it's a visual medium for a book, or a visual medium for a TV show, are still different mediums. As we watch these two go at each other, the question becomes, do you feel the tension? Do you feel the ratcheting up, the roller coaster effect? And I think they did that pretty good in the live-action movie, even though it appears that as far as DeathNote fans go, I'm in the minority. So speaking about adaptions, of course, the most dangerous adaptation to talk about is A Song of Ice and Fire, A Game of Thrones. And much like the DeathNote, I enjoy this season, but I enjoy it on a completely different level than I enjoy the books. In fact, this is one of those ones that I can be a little more specific on what the pacing change is. Before I go into specifics, I want you to just walk with me through an imaginary situation, a hypothetical. You're a big fan of something, a book, an anime, a movie, a TV series, whatever. And you're a writer, and you get given the chance to make an adaptation of it to another medium. But, as part of making that adaptation, you have to cut the story down. Because instead of getting 100 hours, instead of getting 10,000 pages, you're getting a percentage of that. Maybe as low as 5% of that time. And again, this is a story you love. One that you think is just a masterpiece. Well, first thing you're going to do, of course, is say, what did the original story get wrong? What didn't I feel right about? And even a writer themselves is going to look back on a story that they love, that they wrote, and be able to see some things they could change. Nobody's perfect. But then, even after you change those things, you still need to cut, and you need to cut, and you need to cut. Some writers call that part of editing killing my babies. And I'm very sure George Martin understands that Dan and Dave had to kill a lot of babies in order to get this on the TV. Can you imagine what you'd do in their place? How would you be able to get it into only 200 hours of TV time? I mean, I could just turn the book of Game of Thrones into 150 of those hours if I wanted to. And yeah, Season 1 might have been one of the best seasons, in fact, possibly the best. It was perfectly paced, it had some great moments, and as each season went on, things had to kind of get a little faster and faster. And now we've gotten to breakneck speed. And part of that is that the books have literally an unlimited amount of time to unload information. But at the same time, the people made the choice to combine seasons 3 and 4 as Storm of Swords, Feast of Crows, and cut out half of the Feast of Crows. And I understand that too. Again, TV shows have different pacing, it has to. But at the same time, there are characters I really miss. So, all in all, people like to judge the TV shows as if they were the books, though. And moments like this that could have had 3 or 4 point of view chapters all interacting in and around it. Instead, we get, maybe a minute and a half on the TV, and we have to convey all the same information, but we also have the benefit of, we have visual clues. We have Danny just literally looking at these cuts and realizing what they mean. And, well, Emilia Clarke is not the best actress ever. Her face does convey some of that. Have you ever heard the phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words? Well, a moving picture, constantly moving pictures, cuts down on some of that as well. However, one of the big things they did, this year especially, although more and more as each season went on, was show less and less travel time. The books have someone wake up on day 1, go about their normal day. Day 2, they go and start traveling to another city. And we normally get at least one transitory story. And it can be completely in someone's head. It can just be them thinking about what's going on. The TV show would never work that way. But the TV show did try to have some action sequences, some sex sequence, something that could keep you going during these moments of transition. And each season they got less and less. The first season we had, it took 30 days to get from King's Landing to Winterfell. This season, it took one scene change, just bang, you're there. I'm not saying that that's bad, necessarily, because both pacings could work. I think there are better ways to get the pacing to work in this season, but we have moments where the pretty much D&D adventuring party went north of the wall, and then had to have someone go back and get help. And literally, within one episode, Dany shows up. Within the same episode they get in trouble, she's bailing them out. I want you to think about this for a minute. If this were Season 1 Game of Thrones and the same scenario was happening, how would it have played out? Well, it probably would have played out with an episode ending with them being in trouble. A week later, when we come back, they're still in trouble, but they're going to be sitting on that island surrounded by whites, talking about how screwed they are. And then that episode would probably either midpoint or end with Gendry getting back to the wall and sending the Raven. But we wouldn't even get Dany getting the Raven till the next episode. It would be a 3-episode arc, her coming to their rescue. And you'd feel, not necessarily know, but you'd feel like, hey, that took time. They barely made it. You'd watch Thoros of Myr slowly freeze to death. You wouldn't just turn the page and it's done. And in the books, even more so. Turn the Page is a great example. If you were reading a book, forget this book, just a book, and it was, let's say, someone going to high school, and Chapter 1 was all about their first day freshman year, and then you turn the page, and Chapter 2 was about their junior dance. You'd be like, hey, wait, there's a lot of stuff that happened in between here, isn't it? There's missing information here. And even if you got it recapped, even if you were in their minds for that, that would feel like a breakneck pace speed. And you'd feel kind of cheated. And that's how these fans are. On the other hand, George, where's my Winds of Winter? As I think about my own writing and my own pacing, there are bits of advice that you get given as a writer. Things like, when you do fight sequences or things that should be tense, use short, small sentences in your novel. When you want things to be drawn out, use long sentences and commas. And sometimes I break those rules myself, and I wonder, am I being innovative and edgy? Or am I just messing up the flow of my story? And at the same time, I also ask myself that question of how I would adapt different things. Both of the stories I'm using as my main thrust for this month are adaptations of different things into different mediums. But overall, it could go for any story. And we study stories because they're important. Do you know why they're so important? Because they tell us who we are. And if you don't have a story that entertains, you don't have anything. Because no one's going to pay attention to it. So as I'm trying to learn what it means to be a writer and how people tell stories, and yes, walk through the heart of the stories we tell, I'm trying to figure out, what does pacing mean? So for the next 3 weeks, we're going to examine what it means and how we build stories. I hope you can join me as we take a look into all of these building blocks. And as we do, maybe you can every once in a while let me know what you're thinking too. Because let's be honest, I don't have all the answers. This isn't a YouTube channel full of answers. It's a YouTube channel full of questions. But now, instead of a question, I have a request. If you like my crazy ideas and my theories, please hit that like button and share this video. Tell other people that care about stories about it. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and, of course, also enable alerts. I'd like to build a whole community. A community of readers, a community of watchers, a community of writers, a community of people who care about why and how we tell stories, as we try to get to the heart of the stories we tell. Have a good night, and thanks for watching.